Darkness Dwells is brought to you by Crystal Lake Publishing. Go to crystallakepub.com and go check out what they've got going. They've been publishing since 2012, and they are only getting bigger. They have published the likes of Ramsey Campbell, Mercedes Yardley, and Clive Barker, amongst many more. We're also supported by audible.com. Go to audibletrial.com/darknessdwells and pick out any book that you want when you sign up for a free trial membership. And that trial lasts for 1 month and you get any book you want for free. So go and check that out. Welcome to the Darkness Dwells podcast, episode 117.
I'm Michael Schutz.
And welcome to this week. This week we have a really cool show. We have guest Daniel Braum. He's going to be stopping by to talk with us. And Michael and I, we're going to be discussing the 1987 film Street Trash. So, how you doing, Michael?
I'm doing well. Trying to survive the summer. People around here have gone crazy. Everybody's like slamming their doors, and you know how they say that like the hotter it gets, the more angry people get. I think Bradbury even wrote that short story about like the hottest day of the year or whatever. Mm-hmm. There's more murders. Right? I feel it in there.
Yeah.
I feel it. Boiling up inside people.
Yeah, it's. I'd say I'd say that we have had a kind of a mild summer. We've had some heat, but mostly it's been a little bit cooler than normal. So, what's it like? Like, is it really humid and nasty down there?
It's really humid today. As soon as I woke up. Yesterday, I think it got to 103. Today's going to top out at 106.
Ooh, that's brutal.
Yeah. That's pretty brutal. I don't know where my humidity thing is. You know, generally not that humid in Northern California, but it feels really muggy inside. Maybe it's just kind of an inside thing, but that's still way too hot.
Oh, for sure. I would melt. I would die. Actually, to be honest with you, I do prefer heat over cold. And there's been a couple of days where I was working at my job at the factory, and it was just, god-awful. But, you know, it was nothing like last year. So I think we've gotten off lucky so far. So what have you been watching?
Boy, I have been binging all of my shows that came up. Of course, Stranger Things, and which disappointed me, gotta admit. Mm-hmm. Let's see, Legion ended, Orange is the New Black ended. I went and I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood a couple days ago.
Yeah.
And I did not like it.
You didn't like it?
I didn't like it at all. Not at all. And I think I'm the only person, because it is just overwhelming praise.
Yeah.
I did not like it.
You do know that you're talking about a Quentin Tarantino film, right?
Well, he'd better do better.
Do you think maybe the heat down there is affecting your mood and therefore affecting your perception on these types of things?
I've considered that, but I was in a great mood Monday night. I was in full blown, so happy to be in the movie theater. I had my treats. I took a picture of the blank screen before anything started. I was so happy, anticipating, going to see the 9th film by Quentin Tarantino. It's possible, though. That is possible that I'm in some weird dream fugue from heat.
It's irritating you on a spiritual level.
Very possibly.
Yeah. So what was it about Stranger Things that you didn't like?
First of all, the whole Russian. I don't want to give any spoilers, but the whole Russian subplot just seemed ridiculous to me. But mainly, thinking back to like the first season, especially the first season, it felt so like the whole retro back in the 80s thing felt very natural. It felt like they had captured my childhood. They had encapsulated it. By now in the third season, it felt like it's just a kitschy making 80s references kind of thing. It just doesn't feel as special.
Yeah.
It just feels like a show that takes place in the 80s. It doesn't help that the kids are growing up and they're growing apart. I think that they handled that. They handled like the drama storylines incredibly well. I like that a lot. Mm-hmm. But it just doesn't seem as special and as much as like, oh, they pulled out my childhood and displayed it for me. Now it's just kind of a cheeky retro show.
Yeah. I would say it's not the strongest season, but I still enjoyed it, honestly. I think that I don't know. I think honestly the issues I had with it are that the kids are getting older, and they're all in relationships. I mean, the drama for that, like you said, was handled well, but I don't know. I could have done without that myself. It would have been better if it was just them versus the evil things, the evil people, and the other what do they call it? The Upside Down.
Yeah, the Upside Down.
But I guess they do want to evolve the characters, and that makes sense. And I'm clinging on to what impressed me first, and so I guess I need to let that go. I don't know.
And the thing about the Russians is that I know, while I was hating it, I recognize that a lot of people are going to love that. Mm-hmm. Because of what that says, that is a very mid to getting late 80s sort of thing. Yeah. Red Dawn and Rocky IV, everything was the Russians. And I'm thinking to myself, if they did a time travel season, I would fucking love it. I would be in heaven. And like half the people will be groaning and thinking, "Oh my god, they're doing time travel." So it's just a matter of taste. I know that, but
we need
so silly.
We need to have Stranger Things in space.
Oh, I can go up on a space shuttle and they go to space camp.
That would be awesome, in my opinion. It would probably totally ruin the franchise, but
they finally got around to hinting that Will is gay, and I've been thinking that for a couple seasons. I'm thinking, I'm just getting a vibe. I'm getting a vibe from this character, and they had that brief little thing with that was like really, really well done. That conversation he had with Mike and that look of shock when Mike said that. I can't help that you don't like girls. It was like, I can't believe you just said that.
Yeah. I like that scene too because it kind of shows that this is what his are thinking, and yet nobody's voiced it until this point. Yeah. And I didn't think of it myself, but sure, it works, right? Why not?
That was a very bad time to be a gay kid. I remember
for sure.
that. Midwest.
In many ways, it still is. I'm sure.
Yeah, I go back to Wisconsin every once in a while, and I don't know. Things aren't like they are in California.
No. Well, I guess it depends where you live, too, because people are pretty free in regards to that around here, too. Except for the older people, of course. They don't get it, but...
Yeah.
but that's typical anywhere.
I was having lunch in well, basically a bar. I didn't know it was going to be such a bar. But I was having lunch with one of my friends in my old hometown, and I'm like, okay. And so my husband, and I looked around, I whispered, I'm like, can I say that in here? Am I gonna get lynched if I?
They're coming for you, Michael. They got their
Would you say,
pitchforks.
hey, this has nothing to do with anything, but I'm going to throw this out. When I went to college, it was in Wisconsin. It was a little up north. It would have been 1995, and I went into this bar, and there's this thing. I'm sure it's in bars all over, different forms of it, but it's like video trivia, where you can sit there and you get a little console, and the screen shows this trivia, and you have your little box, and you put in, the answer, and you play trivia with whoever else is in the bar, and they have this console. There's one other person in there, and he was playing, and we were going like back and forth, and he won. So I called the bartender over, and I asked her, I'm like, can you get that guy a shot? And she looked at me weird, and she said, why? She's like, demanded to know why I wanted to buy a guy a drink. It's like, wow. It's like, because he won the trivia thing. And
yeah.
And none of your business either way.
I remember here in Canada, it's legal for, as it is, I think, in most states, if not all states, it's legal for gay marriages.
Yeah.
And I remember when that passed. When that passed over, I was in a Walmart when it just happened, and all the gay people obviously were celebrating, and not in the Walmart, but just on social media and whatnot.
Oh, I really thought you meant in Walmart.
No. and so I was in Walmart, and there were these people talking. I could hear them. One of them was a person who worked there, and she was like an old woman. She was like, you could tell she's like in her 70s, right? And she was like, okay, so they got their freedom. I don't care. I just wish they didn't flaunt it in our faces all the time. And I wanted to say to them, okay, you know what? These people have been repressed for so long, and now they get to do what, us straight people get to do. They're going to celebrate. They're not shoving anything in your face.
Yeah, really. Boy.
But, that's just the mindset that they have.
I'm sure she has the pride parade, running, mashing her bushes and hedges every year. It's so in her face. Who knows? Maybe she does. Maybe she lives right on the route and she doesn't like that.
She was probably one of those Canadians who had a Trump sign on their lawn, despite the fact that they're Canadian.
Oh my God, there are people that do that?
Oh yeah. It's not as crazy as it is in the States, but you have people with stickers on their windows, and they did have signs out in their lawns. Oh. And it's like, my God, do you even know where we live? Anyways, moving on, we have, as I said earlier, we have an awesome show. We're going to be talking with Daniel Braum, and we're going to be talking about one hell of a batshit crazy movie.
Yes.
Street Trash. And so
movies.
We're going to take a quick break here just to play the bumper, and when we return, we're going to be joined by Daniel, and we're going to talk to him, and then, after that, we are going to talk about some craziness.
It's Street Trash.
Street Trash. All right, welcome back this week. As promised, we have an awesome guest. Daniel Braum's fiction has been classified as fantasy, science fiction, and horror, but he prefers the good old-fashioned term of just fiction, which, when he was growing up, simply meant a story where anything could happen. His stories frequently defy category and reside in the fuzzy areas between genres, utilizing and combining genre elements to produce tales that are wholly unique. He is the author of The Night Marchers and Other Strange Tales, and which is his first collection of short stories, and was published by Cemetery Dance, and recently his first novel, The Serpent Shadow. Welcome to the show, Daniel.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's great to be here.
So, you're not the first person we've had on the show who is published by Cemetery Dance. I think for a lot of horror writers, this is definitely like a bucket list thing.
Yeah.
And so I have to ask, how did you get involved with Cemetery Dance?
Well, I was first published over a decade ago in the magazine. I think it was issue either 54 or 55. And I was a slush pile survivor. I was my short story Across the Darien Gap, which has been reprinted a couple places. It's reprinted in the Night Marchers, and I think there's an audio version of it for free on the Pseudopod podcast audio website. And yeah, that was pulled out of the slush, and that was the first way I got involved with Cemetery Dance. I didn't think of myself as a horror writer at that time, so that began, fantastic immersion and education about the horror genre for me through the lens of Cemetery Dance and what they've published over the years.
How did you come about getting your collection, The Night Marchers, out with them?
Obviously that was again, I just think of as sheer good fortune and sheer luck. All to the team over there, Richard Chismar and Norman Prentice. Norman Prentice had bought several of my stories, and Richard had bought them, and so I had appeared a few times in Cemetery Dance. At the time, they asked me for a collection, and I had some work that had been forthcoming from them. And it was a simple, that Norman was just beginning and heading up the ebooks division, and he had, I was fortunate enough that he was one of the people that he was interested in having the book appear as a Cemetery Dance ebook. In the book, what's interesting about the book is the paperback rights were then bought by a different publisher, because the Cemetery Dance has a long backlog at the time, and they still do, and that's how the different versions and a bit of the history of that collection.
That must have been like an incredibly exciting time.
Oh, absolutely. And, for me, it never gets old. Every single sale of a short story is incredibly exciting, and that even more so. Like, as I learn more and more about horror and learn more and more about Cemetery Dance, I guess it doesn't get old for me. It keeps getting exciting.
In your bio, you mention that your fiction tends to mix genres, and having read your work myself, I see a mixture of horror, magic realism, fantasy, thriller, and science fiction. It's like all in there. It's crazy. Now, do you define genre at all when you're writing, or do you just let story take you where it wants to go?
I absolutely, if I have to pick one of those answers, it would be absolutely letting the story take it as it goes. So I would say maybe for the first 10 or so years of writing, not really, I guess, less embarrassed to sound, I didn't really know enough about genre to define it or to really mix it with control. So like I said in my bio, I just kind of wrote in an organic fashion and was like, well, I'm not going to limit myself, or I didn't even think about the limits. I'm like, well, this is a story I had to tell. And for a while there, I was a little bit, the word is dissuaded that I thought I was throwing at a certain dartboard, but I was really hitting a different dartboard, because, I guess genre ultimately is a construction. So it was excellent to finally find a home, with Cemetery Dance and with horror, to have, people say, oh, your work is this, or it's close to this. Now, fast forward to right around when the Night Marchers is coming out, a little bit after, is when I'm really learning more genre, self-educating, reading in the genre to writers, actually thinking about what stories are, which is incredibly exciting. And fiction after that, I think it's allowing me to do some of these things, to do different tricks, to do different things with more of a sense of control. That was right around the time I discovered me and started to understand the term weird fiction and, quiet psychological literary horror like Robert Aikman and Shirley Jackson. And that's the stuff that really gets me excited, and what I really aim to be working in that wheelhouse, so to speak.
I would think it must be incredibly freeing to have that mentality that it's just fiction. I guess since you started that way, I I guess what I'm wondering is now that people have kind of foisted genre on you, have you changed at all? Do you see your work in different ways? And do you think that it was more freeing when you started to just have complete free reign, do whatever you wanted without ever having to worry about genre?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I think it's a great. I think you said it all in that question, and my experience has been both. Like I guess I'm fortunate enough because I'm working in the small press, which tends to be a very and freeing atmosphere to begin with. So I haven't felt. I don't feel free because I've never really felt caged in a sense. I think, but working in the genre, specifically working with editor Norman Prentice, has been. I just call it like my education. It's been. I feel stronger as a writer, whereas sometimes I've done things sort of organically, we used to say it the fancy way, or to say by accident, the other way. So now I feel, especially with the Serpent Shadow, I felt I was more able to, in the editing process and in like the decision-making process, I feel more confident to be like, hey, this is a Cemetery Dance story, this is a Cemetery Dance project. When choosing directions to go, I have more awareness, like, all right, well, that's really out of the box, and if I'm not sure which way I'm going, let's steer the train this way. And I felt more confident. So I guess maybe it becomes at some point I've internalized less of an organic process, but I've never really felt. I've always felt still very grateful for that. And I guess it's it's growth or strength as a writer. If I'm trying to shoot for an anthology or trying to shoot for, I feel more confident, or at least more in control of steering something that way. So it's just been different.
I was curious as to what your process is for when you're creating a story, or when you sit down to write a story from its genesis to its completion. But, obviously that's a very long road, but I was just wondering what is going through your mind when you sit down to write a story, and what's the basic process that you go through?
I tend to be a setting first writer, in that things that inspire me tend to be setting basis. You have a character conflict and setting, or at least to me the beginning components of the story. So like there'll just be a place that will inspire me, and I'll just keep a file. It's not even a file. I'll keep a collection of napkins or backs of receipts of just little story ideas. Like, let's write a story about Yuma City and this interviewer named Michael, and that'll just be a thing. And periodically I'll come back and start to work up those ideas until they have, like, for me, what I need to really start writing or drafting is I need character conflict and the setting, or in the idea. So just having a setting or just having an idea, it needs to go into dramatic form. So the organic part of it is just encountering and capturing, quote unquote, so I don't forget them, things that inspire me. And then it becomes, more of an active process of working them up into what I consider a dramatic form.
One thing that I really enjoy about reading your stories is that these stories really take you to other places. There's many exotic locations that you write about, so I was wondering, do you travel a lot?
Sometimes, or when I was younger, I used to. Some of the places and some of the stories result of having traveled, and others are a product of either imagination or research. I tend not to be a research kind of person, so if a story is about a place that I haven't been, then the story tends to be a fictionalized either place or fictionalized version of a place.
Very cool. Like, you can tell that especially with Serpent Shadow, like, I've never been to Mexico, so I can't call from experiences, but it was almost as though I was there while I was reading it.
Oh, thank you very kindly. I mean, it's one of the things that I very much enjoy about fiction is what you just said. There's the ability or the feeling to be transported to a place that I've either never been or never will be. And that's how I got started just being interested in reading and writing in fiction. It's a book called The Jaguar Hunter by Lucius Shep that I just pulled off the shelves of my local library, and a lot of those stories are set in Central America, and it was just like an amazing experience for me that's always remained with me.
So, what is it exactly about these locations that inspire your fictional worlds?
I mean, sometimes it could be different things. God, when I stop to think about it, I think setting is a fantastic way to approach character, because I think of when I'm trying to work up the plots or the stories, I'm thinking, well, what are and what are conflicts that are inherent and necessary to these places, and some of them just product of my imagination and thinking and logic, using logic to deal with it, and then others in like the novel The Serpent Shadow are just little edges that so the UK happens to be a place that I traveled to and had traveled to over time in different times of my life. Like the first time I was there, I was just a teenager, and I'd been there in different times over my life. So one of the things that struck me was the notion of how a place not only changes, but what I'm calling, grows up or chooses a direction. Like, so Cancun in the early 1970s wasn't really a place that existed. It was, it was just sort of a place that was chosen to be a site of development. So how does that? There are a lot of issues that come up with that, with strong points and people on both sides of it. So, at least with that setting, that was how I worked my way into the story. I wanted to somehow find a story that brought to life that concept of place. Even if on the surface, The Serpent Shadow isn't really, you wouldn't say, oh, okay, this is about how Cancun came to be this either wretched place or fantastic place, depending on how you see it. It's also a story about character and mythology and folklore and horror and the supernatural. But ultimately, it's sort of a secret, at least in my imagination.
Yeah, I think one reason why I felt that way is because you don't. The story takes place. Well, you have the main characters. It's a family of tourists, and you don't just keep them on the resort. Basically, you take them out into the country and to the Mayan ruins. And I really like that. And check it with them.
Stories have to entertain. I mean, I like for stories to do a lot of the other things that stories can do for us, but if they don't entertain, if they're not doing something fun, not doing something that the author isn't engaging with, it's not going to entertain. One of the other things as I'm growing up, right as time passes, these stories sort of they become time capsules of places that aren't anymore. I mean, this was writing about Mexico in 1986. In the Night Marchers, I've written about places without thinking about it. I was just writing about them as they are. But now, 20 years later, these places are very different, and never to be the same again. So it's kind of an interesting way. I don't know, an interesting aspect of it.
I also really enjoyed the main characters because they seem like typical characters that you would come across in horror stories. They felt like they were a well-off, close-knit family. How do you build character? Did they talk to you, or do you just develop them as they go?
Wow. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I definitely, character is something that often is a product of choice and thinking about them. Like the other part of the inspiration, it's the magic, so to speak. Like I can't really what I'm inspired by. It's hard for me to write a story I'm not interested in or not inspired by. But then when I get that, let's say in the case of the Yucatan, and I'm feeling nostalgic about it, or feeling on the sense of wonder or a sense of horror about it, then I will actually try to think about, well, what is going to be the best viewpoint character to make that story, and then I will actually develop who these characters are. So I think in that process, that's where the conflicts come. And when I say conflicts, I'm just kind of working through your question right now. Like there's the conflict of the story, what I would call the external. Like, okay, David, just wants to get with Anne Marie. He just wants to, find a way in life as an 18-year-old. There's the external, that external conflict of the supernatural and the actual peril he's in, but then there's that internal conflict of like, well, what would an 18-year-old really want at that point? He's like, yeah, I want to get the girl, I want to feel connected, I want to feel something. So I think if those elements into a character and into a story, and somehow have the answers to those, be connected or present, I'll be happy with doing my job as presenting a character.
You mentioned earlier that you're not a big fan of research, but this story feels like it has a lot of history to it. Did you do much research for Serpent Shadow?
I was asked this question last night, and I guess I guess there's different kinds of research. I didn't do much research in terms of what you might think of research, but I would just say it's accumulated knowledge. So over my life, I've been doing the readings or visiting there. So in a way, that was all research, even though I didn't, wasn't thinking of it as research at the time. So it was just some things that I was genuinely interested in, and thus I knew. So I didn't do a lot of book kind of research for this particular story.
Very cool. Now, I was wondering, given the history of the band, I'm surprised that there isn't more horror fiction related to this type of topic. How come you think that it's taken so long for this type of thing, man horror, I guess you could call it, to come about?
You got me. I mean, maybe just because it's outside the general experience. I mean, maybe there are books out there. Shepard really deals with the country and the people. There's a great book by the Sisters of Slaughters called Blind Blue. Recent release. There's another book of a mainstream horror publisher that seemed to have Central American in it. So they're there, but maybe it's just hey, not everything's going to be that big part of that bell curve. I mean,
yeah.
I don't have a good answer for you.
I'm surprised that this type of subject wasn't accepted to death in the 80s. You know what I mean? Just in tunes or so.
What's that?
It seems to out in the 2010s.
Yeah, I mean, James Tiptree Jr. Had a book published by Arkham House called Tales of the Quintana Roo. It was 3 stories set in the same place. Are they horror? I think they're more weird fiction. I like to buy copies of the original magazines when you buy them for a couple bucks on eBay to see where they were in their original publications. In this case, it was Asimov's magazine, Fantasy and Science Fiction. And let's just say 40 years ago, I wasn't really proud to read the editorial comments about the mind. It's perception of how things fit together are very different. So, maybe just a sign of the times that we're being more open to horror from other cultures.
Very much so. You mentioned in there as pertaining to somebody who may have wrote a weird fiction story. I was wondering if you're into weird fiction much at all.
Yeah, incredibly. I'd say I'm really new to it. In just knowing, I'd always heard the term, but I never really put 2 and 2 together what it was and who are the people that wrote it. So basically now I don't have time to read, but if I'm reading, I want to be either catching up on some of the classic weird fiction, and what I'm interested in reading right now, the people who are writing are, there's a lot of new writers who are writing weird fiction, and that really excites me. And I guess, I might have my terminology all wrong, but what I love about weird fiction is that it's sort of, to me at least, part of the definition of that is at least it's sort of that horror that doesn't quit. It's still in the family of horror, but there's something different about it, at least to this reader.
I read another interview of yours. You cited stories of J.D. Salinger and Stephen King as being influential, which on the surface sounds really weird to match those, except both of them a lot too.
Oh, for sure,
and I think some of Salinger's like A Good Day for Banana.
So yeah,
Uncle asked me, there's something a little off in his New Yorker stories. They're definitely sort of kind of weird, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, maybe what's I don't know what makes them weird or not, but I mean that's to me it's perfectly intuitive because as a kid or as an early teenager growing up, I had the Salinger I had to read in school, and it was some of the stuff that I had to read in school, and then I was lucky enough that my mom would come from the supermarket because these were the days where you could get paperbacks at the supermarket and be like, here's a fat book for you to read. I'd be like,
yeah.
Blue Eyes, The Stand.
Yeah.
So that's what I read. And I guess the difference between Salinger and like I'm so glad you said A Perfect Day for a Banana Fish. What do the two have in common? I mean, thinking to this guy at least, both Salinger and King, you believed in those characters, erringly. And if you can't, I don't know. Maybe there's some stories where they are, it's like I don't know, there are lesser believable, like or more caricature. But at least with King and with Salinger, when you believe in them unerringly, you can do anything with it. And I guess with Salinger, King Salinger just took different turns. Salinger would turn towards the mournful or the literary or the philosophical, and I guess King took a steer into the supernatural. But that's the first stuff I read. I can't choose it.
That's not a bad place to start, though.
Yeah, I mean, lucky for me. I mean, there's plenty of stuff I read that either forgotten or I know I've read it. It didn't speak to me or I didn't connect to it.
I think that you and I share a favorite author as well. I think I did Kelly Link as a favorite.
Oh yes, yeah. Recent. I'm so glad you said Kelly Link. After I attended the Clarion Writers Workshop in 2002. That was a big dividing line for me. Before 2002, I really didn't know anything about genre. I mean, it was very limited. And after 2002, my world started opening up as to just how many writers are out there and what genre is and where people are in that. That led to reading Kelly Link, and very, very exciting author. Just so exciting to me.
She sort of defies genre as well. I think that's kind of trending right now. But I definitely see a lot of folklore in her stories. Is that something that you would ever like to explore?
Yeah, I need to learn more about it. But I really love what Kelly Lee approaches genre. Like some of the things, she will take genre stories and just give you like the back corner of it, and she doesn't stick to just one. Now I've forgotten one of her short stories is almost like a retelling or a continuation of an Arthur Machen tale, like with the creature from A Whistle and Come Ye Lad. I'm sure I'm mangling that title. I should also tell you an alien invasion story, which was called The Surfer, and it's like she'll present that story without the aliens. So The Surfer's about a small group of humans trapped in a warehouse and one surfer, and this is the lens through which we see like an alien invasion story. So it's just it takes that I guess genre fans such as myself, such as us, are interested in, and just gives us like the really, really intimate little bits of it. There's a lot that's going on in the stories, but that's just one thing that I find really exciting about.
All right, so who are you reading today that you're excited about?
Wow. Well, I had been. I just completed work on an anthology. It's called Spirits Unwrapped, and it's an anthology of weird fiction, mummy-themed stories. And I'll say two new authors and two established authors. Two names I wanted to put out were Casilla Ferrante and Ina Efris are two writers that they've only got a couple of stories out there, but I'm really in love with them. They're really great. And I've had the good fortune to publish we're going to be publishing this short story by John Langan and Lee Thomas, both who are no stranger to horror fiction. So, like, reading their stuff is fantastic.
That's exciting. So, I love both those authors, especially John Langan, a current favorite of mine.
Yeah.
Oh, before we let you go, what do you have planned for the future and look forward to that you can talk about too?
Yeah. Well, something that was just released. I had a short story in an anthology by Black Shuck Books out of the UK called Peridolia, edited by James Everington and Dan Worth. I had a short story in that it's called, what is my title? I'm flipping. It's one of those titles. It's called How to Stay Afloat When Drowning. So that's my most recent short story. In October, from Leslie Press, is the book that I edited called Spirits Unwrapped. And in the early quarter, first or second quarter of 2020, my third short story collection coming up from Leslie Press as well. So I haven't mentioned that. That might be the first time, just today, the interviews I'm doing today is the first time I'm mentioning that.
Oh, very cool.
Thank you very much.
All right, where can readers and listeners find you online?
Well, the way to connect with the Serpent Shadow is right now just available as an ebook on the Kindle store. So if you just go on to Amazon.com, either under my name, Daniel Braum, or D. Braum, or the Serpent Shadow, you can connect to that. And my website is it's a WordPress site, so it's Blood and Stardust. I think .wordpress.com. I'm probably managing that too.
That's right. I'll add it all into the notes.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Daniel. Whenever you have something else that you would like to promote, please feel free to reach out and contact us.
Yes. Thank you so much for replying to me. I'm really glad that I reached out to contact you. This was a great conversation. I appreciate your interest in the work and for helping me get the word out there. So I look forward to talking to you both again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
With you too. Take care.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Pain has a face. Allow me to show it to you. Gentlemen, I am pain.
I see dead people. Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
When there is no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.
I just watched it for the third time, and the third time was actually it ended literally just before I hit the call button to call you.
Is the third time the charm?
Yeah, well, okay, let's get something straight here. This movie is just, it is literally batshit crazy.
Yes, and it fits really well with Brain Damage, that this is the next one. I think there felt like similarities.
Yeah, there are similarities, and I think a lot of the similarities are in just how insane it is.
Yeah.
So the synopsis on IDBM is: a liquor store owner sells alcohol beverages to homeless people, unaware that the bottles actually contain toxic brew. And that is literally like what the whole movie is about. Now, there are this movie is hard to discuss because it's almost like an Italian film, Italian horror. There is no central plot. It's just a bunch of crazy things leading from one to another. But there are little stories in here. Like there's a murder mystery. Well, not really a mystery. There's a murder investigation, I should say. There's conflict between cops and the mafia. And mostly, though, it's about these homeless people. And so this movie is directed by James M. Murrow. This is the only movie he would direct, but he did go on to direct a lot of television. It's written by Roy Frumkes, and it stars, like a lot of these films, people who only starred in this film or very little else. Mike Lackey, Bill Shepell, Vic Noto. So basically the premise is this liquor store has this crate of really old booze that he just wants to get rid of, and so he sells it for like $1. And all the homeless people are like buying it up because it's so cheap. And when they drink it, it acts very quickly, and it melts them into like a Technicolor goo.
Which reminded me a lot of the goo from Elmer in Brain Damage, except he didn't melt people, but it felt like it was kind of the same stuff in a different distillation.
Because they not only melt into a Technicolor goo, it's very loud, and it looks like a very painful death. But oh my god, it's very vivid too. There's about
Bolted that one guy right into the toilet.
Yeah, the first one, the guy steals the drink from the main guy who either stole the booze or purchased it. I'm pretty sure he bought it. He was going to steal it, but he couldn't.
Didn't
so
he? I thought he pinched it. I thought
he might have pinched it, but I'm pretty sure that's where we learn that it was only $1. And I know that at the very beginning of the film, you see him follow the guy in to the liquor store. And I don't know how that guy didn't notice that there was somebody following him, especially with the way he was walking. He was walking like a fucking clown. He's like walking as though he's trying to be quiet, but he looks like a clown. It's like all hunched over and his legs are kicking out, and it's just like, how did you not notice that there's somebody like that behind you? And he like walks right in behind him too in the back of the store, and he goes to steal some booze, and the guy like kicks him out. It's like, whoa. right off the bat, though, that's an indication of how weird this movie is. And so, anyways, yeah, the guy ends up with a bottle of booze, and his friend, I say friend with quotations, so they're all homeless, and they all pretty much steal off each other. And so the guy steals his bottle of booze, and he goes into, like, an abandoned, housing complex that's all destroyed. So the bathroom is, like, outside, basically. And he takes a sip and he melts. And it's very colorful. It looks like they just took random vivid colors of paint and like poured it everywhere for the special effects. Which, the special effects are all practical, and that was nice to see too, because it's funny how when these people melt, they go through it in stages where you don't actually see any melting. You just, the camera changes, and then they've progressed, and then the camera changes again, and they've progressed further, and yet they're all screaming, and all this colorful goo is pouring out of each orifice, and it's just nasty.
That's really interesting, because I'm trying to think, like, in my memory, I could see them actually dissolving. So I guess that was really well done to do one of those, psycho moments where you think you see you're all slashed up and you really don't.
Yeah, well, I guess if you, I just watched it and I kind of noticed that. And there's only maybe 2 meltings. There's 4 people that you sort of see melt, but there's only really 2 that you actually see the progress. The first guy is the one that you stick with the longest while he's melting. And that takes, I don't know, I swear, like 2-3 minutes for him to to completely melt. And I love how you see his face in the toilet afterwards. It's like stretching up. He's like, whoa. Oh. He's still alive, even though he doesn't have a body anymore. So it makes you wonder what exactly happens to them after they melted.
It was very campy. It was very, I like that. Like, they had a very stylized idea of, like, streetwear. Like, it's sort of... It reminded me of Zoolander when there was that line called Derelict. It was like homeless wear.
Yeah.
They had very interesting... it was really... The whole thing was really insulting to homeless people.
It was...
I have to say. It was right with the name. It's just street trash.
Yeah.
Street trash. And there was that rape scene that was like just completely played for laughs, which I thought was really... bizarre. That was the... I just have that in my notes, so I'm trying to remember what that refers to. I think that was the young lady that worked at the junkyard, right?
Yeah.
And her boss.
Yeah. Yeah, she gets found the next day by the beach because she was murdered too. And that's just, this movie is described as a dark comedy, and this goes to show you just how dark it gets. It's definitely not a movie for everyone, because it really does insult pretty much everyone, not just the homeless people, but it's very racist as well. Like, there's a scene where at the end where the black homeless guy, he gets bonked on the head by a pipe, and the guy's like, the main character actually is like, oh, don't worry about him, he's black, nobody's gonna care.
Oh, God. I forgot about that. Oh,
And
see, by that time I was obsessed with the whole dick joke with the dick flying around.
yeah, the
What the
severed
hell?
penis.
Oh,
Yeah, you can't talk about this movie without talking about that. And the one character, Bronson, he's the big homeless guy with the beard. He's a Vietnam War vet, and he is just as batshit crazy as this film is. He's got some serious PTSD going on. He's very
well, that's
abrasive.
because of the cannibal Vietnam children.
Yeah, yeah,
It's just the most bizarre thing to throw into a movie I've ever seen.
yeah. It's definitely.
There's a lot of little separate ideas here that they seem to just kind of decide, instead of making an anthology film, why don't we just make it all subplots?
Yeah, that's almost the way it is. And this guy, he's very abrasive. He's abusive. You don't want to be near this guy because he wakes up from nightmares like you just described, tossing fucking grenades and screaming, "Who's on watch? Who's on fucking watch?" No wonder why this guy's homeless. He is totally he cannot function after the Vietnam War. He's still there basically, and he's the one. He's I forget exactly what he's doing, but he's near a fence, and the guy's pissing on the fence on the other side, and it's coming across and hitting him, and so he grabs the guy's penis and cuts it off. and what comes after is basically all the homeless people,
Slapstick, sort of.
yeah, they're like throwing the penis around, and the one guy whose penis it belongs to, he's trying to get it back, and they won't let him. They're like throwing it over his head and laughing. And this goes on
because getting your dick cut off, like, won't make you bleed out, and you'll still be perfectly able to, like, run around. Just have to kind of hold yourself a little bit, and you can run around like crazy trying to grab your dick.
Yeah. As everyone tosses it around and laughs like it's a ball or something, or a toy.
And speaking of balls, I have this written down. Like, the line of the film has to be, you were doing the backstroke on his balls, remember?
Yeah, I remember that.
Remember that? I don't remember what that, like I said, it's just in my notes, but I wrote that down.
Yeah, this movie, it's, I can kind of see why it got lost. Well, it's not lost. What I mean is, kind of got, not your average person does not know what this movie is, and there's probably a good reason for that, because it's very out there. I was just, with the way my brain works, I was just trying to figure out some meaning to this film, and I think if there is any meaning to it, it's like you were talking about before, the street trash. It's the homeless people are all, what would you call it? They're misfits. They're like human trash, and the sad part of that is that some of them actually fought for their country. You know what I mean? And yet, when they get back home, they just get tossed away. Their use has been used up, and because I don't think that Bronson guy was the only Vietnam War vet. I think there were a couple of others, like the main character, Fred or whatever his name was.
Well, there was, the kid that I kind of thought of as the main character. I forget wasn't he? I've forgotten now, but he was like with his brother, and his brother wanted them to stay homeless because that kid looked like he'd be perfectly willing to, like, get a job and everything, but they were, like, stuck living this weird off the radar sort of life. Like, some of them just wanted to be off the radar.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's just, if there's any point to this movie, it's that, and the fact that they just wanted to make something that was totally out there, crazy, and it certainly achieved that. That's for sure. This movie doesn't have a part or a scene where you're not asking, what the fuck? And I'm serious about that. This movie is fucked up from the get-go.
Completely.
Oh my god. Okay, so, what's your final thoughts on this one, Michael?
I liked it. I have to say. That's interesting that you read that it's called the dark comedy. Because I don't think of it like that way. If you tell somebody, "Oh, it's a dark comedy," they'll have a certain thing. It's just like it's a tasteless comedy.
Yes.
It's like there's like nothing else to call it because it's about this horrible, disturbing, batshit crazy stuff, and it happens to be funny. But I don't know. It just for what it is and the time. Like this is probably like around the time that the Kentucky Fried Movie came out. And there's like a lot of zany, weird things during this era. I don't know how to prepare somebody before they watch this, but it's actually pretty good. You know, like not quality wise, but it's really entertaining. There's like, it's just so weird. I mean, I'm not going to give it like 4 stars, but I'll give it 3.5.
Yeah. You know what? I'm fully on board with that. I completely agree. Like, this is by no means a good movie. But if you're looking for something that'll make you things like your sanity,
yeah. Like if you want to have an acid trip but you don't want to do the drug, watch Street Trash, and when it's done, it's like you just had a trip.
Exactly. Yeah, and it only lasted an hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And you're fine. And you can go back into your normal life and be fine.
A little bit changed, but
a little
not
bit
hard.
changed. You'll have more questions when you leave than when you went in.
But you're not going to be harmed in any major way.
Well, unless you're really sensitive. You might get harmed then.
I mean, it's very offensive.
It is an offensive movie, for sure. And there's also trigger warnings, because we did discuss the rape, and there's not only just one rape, actually there is just the one rape, but there's plenty of other periods in the movie where you think a rape might happen, but it just doesn't happen because it gets interrupted or something. So
I have something in my notes, and I don't remember what it refers to, but I have the female one, Sarah, that was gross, with 2 exclamation points.
That might have been the homeless woman who Bronson sort of brought into their circle when she melts, because he ends up with one of those bottles of Viper. It's called Viper.
Yep.
And she takes a big swig from it, and she melts. And yeah, that was pretty nasty. It didn't take her long to melt, but then again, she was pretty petite. So.
Yeah.
And man, was she dirty. To be running around in her underwear like she is through the whole movie is just... she's like caked in dirt. It's gross.
You know, this was definitely done by people that were so coked out of their mind. Yeah. Everybody on the production staff was just coked out of their mind, you can tell.
I think you might be right, Michael.
It was one of those. Oh my goodness!
All right,
I am so glad you recommended it.
Yeah, it's fun,
was
isn't
really
it?
Fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I did not have a bad time.
No, neither did I, and that's one reason why I recommended it for this whole '80s thing, because I wanted to do '80s movies that are like, you know, insane, because a lot of them are,
and like completely off the radar, like Brain Damage, which was like bad, but also a good movie, and Street Trash. I mean, these are movies that people... I have never heard of them. I doubt that many people have. And, you know, if you just dial your expectations back just a little bit, you're going to have a lot of fun watching these.
Exactly. And that's the point, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's what they were doing back then, too. They just wanted to have fun and make a movie. And that certainly comes across.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like something that the characters Cheech and Chong would do. Like those 2 guys in their movies, like the characters in their movies, they would make this movie.
Yes, for sure. I 100% completely agree. All right, so you know what? I'm on board with you on the rating system too. I'll give it a 3.5. It's especially for what it is. It's not meant to be taken seriously. So it's a lot of fun. Definitely, I recommend it. Especially if you're into that kind of thing and you haven't seen it, you need to see this movie.
Definitely.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we are going to close out the show. Thank you for listening to the Darkness Dwells podcast. Michael and I, we forgot to close out the show. And I also want to apologize for if you had any trouble listening to this episode. What it comes down to is I had to switch all my equipment. Except for the microphone. I still have the old microphone, which is good because I love it. Anyway, so I got a new laptop, and because I switched from Mac to PC, I had to get new software to record my Skype calls, and I found that the one that I chose was very sketchy when it came to editing. And I don't know why that is. I'm hoping that it smooths out in the editing, or after the editing, because apparently it's a thing with PCs, at least when it comes to making videos. So I apologize, and I hope to have better quality in future episodes. So if you want to get a hold of us, it's easy to do. You can contact us through Facebook. We have both a page that you can like and a group you can join. You can email us at darknessdwellspodcast@mail.com. And we also have a website you can visit, which is www.wheredarknessdwells.com. And finally, we have a Twitter account, which is darkdweller74. Thank you for listening to the Darkness Dwells podcast, and we will catch you again shortly. Thanks, everyone.